Apollo 11, let's talk about that. There's a quote in your book, in the chapter We Copy You Down, Eagle, where they had landed on the moon, I believe, and you got on a private loop with your flight controllers and said, today's our day, the hopes and dreams of the entire world are with us. And you ended up with, you're a hell of a good team, one that I feel privileged to lead. Whatever happens, I will stand behind every call that you make.
This was very important because I think very few people recognize how young that team was. I was the oldest guy in the room that day at 37. My team members' average age was 26. The majority were roughly 4 years out of college. And this was something that had never been done before, and we were going to take an American to the moon. We were very well trained for it. But it's also important to let people know that whatever happened that day, the thing that was interesting, and it was very stark, throughout every training session, we go into what we call a battle short, where we physically block all power breakers going into the building, and then we lock the control room doors. And when we lock those doors, they will not be reopened until we have either landed in the moon, we've crashed, or we've aborted the landing. And there's only one of those outcomes that is good. And I think it was very important for the people to recognize, my team to recognize, that I would stand behind every decision they would make, because I understood how difficult, I understood the risks that were involved, I understood the fallacies of the people that were in there. But as a team, we must not fail. And this turned out to be very important because one of my controllers, in a documentary we did, expressed it. He says that was exactly, those words were exactly what he needed. And in fact, he says I didn't put it in the book, but he says Kranz also added another set of words to that. He says, I'll stand behind every decision that you make. We came into this room as a team, and we will leave as a team. And he expressed that, and he basically indicated that that was what gave him the conviction to stand up and make tough decisions that day. And Steve Bales was the guidance officer who would address these challenges that we had in the computer. It was a battle to get to the surface. As soon as we cracked the hill and we acquired the spacecraft, we had communications problems, so immediately we had to start relaying everything that we were doing through Mike Collins in the command module. At the same time, my flight dynamics officer, Jay Green, came up and said, Flight, I don't know what's happened, but we're halfway to our abort limit. And that is a word that you don't use casually in mission control. And boy, I mean, everybody listened up to that. And basically he says he'll keep watching. And he indicated we were out in the radial component of velocity, and the concern there was the orbit could be tipped so that we could actually be impacting the moon further on down the orbit without ever knowing it. This was our very limited knowledge we had in some of the technologies of early space. But then we had minor navigation. We had that minor navigation problem. We had a minor electrical problem. We fought these battles. We made the go-no-go to start on down, and at which time then we have to look for the landing radar to come in so we can update the spacecraft's knowledge of its altitude. And as we were waiting for that landing radar to come in, that's when we started having the series of computer program alarms. And that's when Steve Bales had to step up and make some calls. Are we safe to go? Yes or no? Go or no go? And as we were doing that, we also recognized now we're going to be landing long, which means the crew's going to have to take over at higher altitude. And we fought this battle all the way down. Now, the fuel tank of the lunar module is basically a cylinder with a rounded end in that thing, and basically once you moved past the cylindrical portion, we no longer had any gauging. It was like driving your car running on empty, and you wonder when you're going to run out of gas. Well, basically in the testing that we had, we knew that at an average hover throttle setting where the crew isn't ascending or descending, we had 2 minutes of propellant remaining. So we had a guy with 2 stopwatches in the back room, and basically we got a single analog trace, and basically he's following seconds above 30%, seconds below 30%, looking at the watches, subtracting them, and that's how we got The calls that made as to how much fuel we had remaining. We heard the call at 90 seconds, and then 60 seconds, then 45 seconds. And now it's time to start making decisions. We got 30-second call, and now we're looking at a land abort decision. We know the crew's pretty close to the surface because they're kicking up dust. And at the time that we would have said 15 seconds, we recognized the crew was going through shutdown. We had just landed on the moon's surface. But at that time, we were also faced with a land abort decision, which would have been the most complex and riskiest decision that we had made in the history of spaceflight. And then the problem, everybody's cheering, the world's cheering, the people behind the viewing room are cheering, but we got to now go through a series of stay, no stay decisions. We got to keep working. 2 minutes after landing, we got to say, is it safe to remain on the surface of the moon for the next 6 minutes? So 8 minutes after landing, we had to make a stay, no stay decision. Then we had to look at the spacecraft, and 2 hours later, we could give the crew the go-ahead for power down. So while the whole world's celebrating, we're still working to make sure that it's safe to remain in position on the lunar surface where we were. So that was a pretty sporty day, but that team hung together, and these words, stand behind every decision that you will make, really became very important.